Three knocks, 3 centuries, 3 moods. In door 1, a bishop's silhouette. St. Nicholas of Myra, the ring on his hand catching firelight like a tiny sun. In door 2, a tall, caped visitor. Sinterklaas, a ship's whistle tucked in his stride and a ledger under his arm. In door 3, something horned. Krampus. Birch switches a chain you want to believe is pretend, and a grin with too many teeth. It's the same street, the same winter, but which door you open decides the story that you inherit. Now, here's the secret that we will say out loud. Santa is a corridor, not a person. He's a hallway of doors, a saint, a civic host, an alpine shadow, a poem, a political cartoon, maybe even a department store hire or an ad icon. He's edited again and again until he fits each new house. The red suit that you picture didn't drop from the sky fully formed. It was stitched by hagiographers, printers, carvers, poets, illustrators, and admin, and then hemmed together by parents trying to make December feel kind. Bishop to canal pageant, wassail bowl to alpine masks, poem to print shops, ad studio to global brand. And we'll stop by to ask a couple of questions at the door. What work did this vision do for its community? And what did it keep or cut from the door before? So let's open the first door. The room smells of smoke and salt, and within it a saint keeps a quiet ledger while the sea argues with the hull. We begin today in the 4th century with Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, in Lycia in Rome. Now, what we have is not biography in the modern sense, but hagiography, or saints' lives written to teach virtue through story. In these tales, Nicholas does his work in secret. A purse of gold tossed through a window so daughters aren't sold into destitution. Grain is multiplied so a port city doesn't have to starve. A calm hand on a storm-drunk ship so sailors can make harbor. The point isn't whether a ledger can footnote each miracle. The point is what communities needed Nicholas to be: a winter protector who acts before dawn and doesn't bill for it. Now, relics migrate after his death. Sailors claim his bones for Bari centuries later, and the devotion to Nicholas becomes seaborne. He becomes the patron saint of sailors and children, a defender of the wronged and a steady hand on the tiller when the wind is not. Notice the job titles accumulating: protector, patron, defender. Every title is a winter coping mechanism. When food runs thin and daylight gets stingy, it helps to name someone whose humble superpower is just showing up. Now, in the medieval lowlands, the saint learns Dutch. He arrives not as a vague aura, but as Sinterklaas, a cleric that you can schedule. He comes by ship because ports are the heartbeat of Dutch civilization, and he steps ashore with a meter and a crozier, and keeps an inspection ledger for the way a harbor master keeps a book. Children will leave shoes by the hearth, and carrots appear for the saint's horse. The next morning, a small gift sits inside as if generosity were a tide that rose in the night. Public pageantry meets private hope. The bishop's tools, charity, protection, a list, become choreography. Then, in New Amsterdam and later New York, ports export goods and import rituals. Dutch families carry Sinterklaas into their pockets and club rooms. Printers and satirists in the young American city are magpies. They borrow the arrival story and start nudging the bishop toward a local accent. Somewhere between a pier and a parlor, the Saint of Mira becomes a house guest of Manhattan. He will keep the ledger, but he will also learn to laugh. Now, we found the bishop's ethic, generosity with a list, and a Dutch habit of arrival. Open the next door, and the house is louder. England claims December for hospitality and mischief, and our visitor learns to host a party. Now, across the channel, winter walks in as Father Christmas. Less a cleric, more of a personified season. He presides over wassail bowls, mumming, and the old rite of misrule. One night, when roles tilt and the neighbors rehearse the muscle of mercy. When Puritan governments try to leash Christmas revelry, pamphleteers draw Father Christmas as a cartoon argument that joy is not optional. He's jolly with an edge. He's host, judge, and the conscience of the street. Now, English December runs on reciprocity. The poor sing for the rich pretend to be poor, gifts and ale cross doorways like diplomatic letters. Father Christmas doesn't keep a heavenly naughty nice ledger, he keeps a neighborhood one. Who shared, who hoarded, who needs a nudge. Now, if Sinterklaas was a bishop with a list, Father Christmas is the mayor of feelings, licensing generosity with a wink. Now, with these two, you can watch the slow fusion in the Anglophone mind. The Dutch saint brings the child-centered gift logic. The English host brings convivial hospitality and a license to invert the room just once a year. The meter softens towards a cap, and the crozier shrugs into a walking stick. The ledger keeps its lines, but it adds a chuckle. This hybrid fits a plural city. It's less doctrinal, more customizable, ready for German immigrants, Irish carolers, and 1,000 of local casseroles. Now, by the early 1800s, American papers and pamphlets draw winter scenes that are recognizably pre-Santa, a genial bringer who manages household order with toys, timing, bedtime, and who speaks softly to parents about being neighborly. The guest is moving indoors, and so he will need a new script for a chimney. Now, we've built a smile with a ledger, but every smile throws a shadow. If we open the third door, the Alpine door, we will learn how communities script bravery for kids without breaking the room. Now, within Alpine towns, the night before St. Nicholas Day, or December 5th and 6th, they have Nikolaushausabend, which you might meet Krampus, a horned mask, birch switches, and a chain that rattles like a warning, and sometimes a basket you want no part of. Now, he's not the devil. He's pedagogy in fur. He's teachings of the culture. The logic here is twofold. Behave, and the saint smiles. Act out, and the shadow snarls. Children practice fear safely, the way that we teach street crossing by holding a hand before we let it go. You'll also see Perkten figures who are linked to Frau Perkta processing during the 12 days. Now, Perkten runs are part carnival, part communal audit. Masked neighbors traverse each lane so that the whole village is seen. They're covered with bells, fur, carved wood, and they have a strict route order to give the night a bit of grammar. It's how pre-electric communities made their own spotlight. If the light can't come to us, then we will carry it. Now, modern Krampuslauf is surviving by splitting into two muscles. The heritage muscle keeps hand-carved larvae or masks, bronze bells with a voice of their own, and choreography that you can read from 50 feet. Diagonal advance, flare, then retreat. The festive muscle has a nightlife energy. It has LED horns, DJs, and designated jump scare zones. City permits forced a new folklore into the muscle, such as safety codes, which envisions torch distances, mask vision checks, and no touch unless invited. The result feels ancient and contemporary at once. It's a ritual with risk assessment, very similar to how we celebrate Halloween nowadays. Now, when Santa glows global, the alpine teeth get sanded for export, but the lesson travels well. You can teach courage and consequence in ways that let a child win. Families whose ancestors wore the fur still keep a two-door December. They have a saint with gifts and a shadow with consequences. Our red-suited neighbor will keep the twinkle and lose the switches. That's not wrong, it's just partial. So we've got a visitor and his shadow. Now our guests need a map and a schedule, an agreed-upon route through the night. A poem will do that for us, and an illustrator will draw the map. In 1823, a poem appears in a Troy, New York newspaper, A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known to us as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Now, originally it is published anonymously. Later, it's attributed to Clement Moore, though a strong case exists for Henry Livingston Jr. Now, either way, who authored it, the effect of the poem is enormous. The saint becomes domestic, not a procession through the streets, but a welcome household intruder. He shrinks to an elf-like scale, learns the chimney's grammar, and gets a sleigh and reindeer, and acquires a repeatable route. Roof to hearth to stocking to cookie. This is logistical theater. The poem gives parents a storyboard and kids a conspiracy. It moves the miracle into the night, where privacy and imagination are allies. It softens the saint into someone who can stand in a nursery and not unnerve a parent. And deliciously, it is American in its spatial confidence. Rooftops as highways and the home as a stage. Enter the political cartoonist Thomas Nast in Harper's Weekly during the 1860s to 1880s. Nast fastens the figure into a stout, fur-trimmed visitor, planting him at the North Pole where a workshop is installed. And he eventually turns the ledger into an actual book labeled Naughty or Nice. During this time, post-Civil War, Nast uses Santa to talk about the war, about reunification, about elections, mapping national arguments to a kindly face. Now, Nast doesn't invent Santa's whole cloth. He canonizes which doors to keep: the night route, the reindeer, the list, and the laugh. So this results, by the 1880s, we have a grammar and a geography. Now, especially in America, department stores start to notice. Photographers as well notice. Printers can now sell a meeting with the visitor, a line, a lap, and a photo, and the house guest becomes a seasonal employee. New York's Macy's runs with it, and smaller stores eventually follow. Parents get a place to outsource the wonder of the season, and children get receipt quality proof. So, we have our bones and our map. Now the amplifier walks in. Advertising. And who decides which red to make universal? Now, small spoiler, but Coca-Cola didn't invent Santa. It just made his face impossible to miss. In the 1930s, illustrator Haddon Sundblom paints Santa for Coca-Cola. He paints him as a rosy-cheeked, warm-eyed, human-scaled person wrapped in red with white trim. Now, this isn't a new invention of Santa, but what it is stabilization. Earlier artists had used red, and the bishop's palette always allowed it, but Sundblom repeats one look everywhere. Winter magazines, point-of-sale displays, calendars, so that a million living rooms see the same neighbor leaning in from the same angle, always with the same twinkle. Now, the move is subtle but decisive. Santa ceases to be mostly elfish, and he becomes basically your winter uncle. He's relaxed, he's a little conspiratorial, he's definitely comfortable beside a refrigerator as well as a hearth. Advertising's genius isn't originality, it's iteration. Show the same friendly face in 1,000 houses, and you make that face the default. But the red wave by Coke doesn't erase local saints. In Russia and parts of Eastern Europe, you have Ded Moroz, or Grandfather Frosts. He arrives with Snegnorotchka, the snow maiden, around New Year's, a tradition reframed during Soviet secularization and is still alive today. In Norway and Denmark, you have Julenissen, or Julemanden, which blends Nissi, or household spirits in little caps, with imported Santa tropes. Sweden has Jultomtid. Italy keeps La Befana sweeping in at Epiphany. Spain crowns Los Reyes Magos, or the Three Kings, on January 6th. Coke broadcasts, but folklore localizes. Now, what advertising really sells is repetition, a visual shorthand, so greeters in Jakarta, Johannesburg, and Jacksonville can point at the same postcard and say, "Yep, that's Santa." Now, that shorthand brings comfort, but also a risk. The corridor of doors can collapse into one very red door. The work for grown-ups is to keep the hallway visible. So the saint, the host, and even the shadow can still breathe inside the brand guidelines. Now, a single face meets a plural city. We open the big last door. Race and commerce. Who gets to be Santa? Who stands beside him? And how institutions teach the legend. Now, in the Low Countries, in Europe, Zwarte Piet, or Black Pete, has become a winter referendum on belonging. For generations, parades staged Pete in blackface, with servant tropes. Now today, some towns retire the character, but others replace him with soot-smudged helpers. Some others dig into tradition. The debate isn't about ruining fun, it's about who pays the price for someone else's fun. A modern family can keep Sinterklaas, the saint, the ledger, and the boat, without keeping a caricature that harms neighbors. In North America, department store Santas have been a thing since the late 19th century. The lore loves James Edgar of Brockton, Massachusetts in the 1890s. For decades, the default Santa was white. Slowly, cities and malls have added black Santas, Latino Santas, Asian American Santas, indigenous Santas, and even deaf Santas fluent in ASL. This representation isn't a political garnish to the season that we know, it is pastoral care for children in a secular season. Letting more kids see the welcome is for them. Speaking of keeping the season for kids, there is NORAD's track of Santa. In the middle of the Cold War, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, was deep in plans and preparations against a Soviet assault on the United States. However, in 1955, a misprinted ad routed a child to a military phone line within NORAD headquarters. The officer on duty, Colonel Harry Shoup, later answered the call, played along, and the command eventually adopted the ritual. Volunteers would answer calls and emails asking to track Santa. Now, a defense network spends one night a year doing make-believe on a continental scale. It's PR, yes, and it's pedagogy. Power can soften without losing face. Institutions write myth, and sometimes they choose gentleness. So what stories do we keep for our kids and for ourselves? Well, we keep the ones that teach generosity without strings, awe without fear, and belonging without gatekeeping. We retire what harms, we remodel what excludes, but keep the surprise intact. The possibility that a knock at the door is the sound of someone choosing to be kind. Open the first door again. We have Nicholas with a purse of gold and a smile he doesn't want credit for. The second, Father Christmas, is raising a bowl and reminding the rich they live among neighbors. The third, Krampus, teaching courage and consequence in masks that smell like pine smoke. And then the pages, Moore and Livingston by a quill, Nast by block and ink, and the glossy sunblom smile that learned to live on your fridge. We didn't invent Santa. We edited him to a helper that we needed, and we will keep editing him to fit a house where more people are at home. Thank you guys for struggling with me through this episode. As you can hear, my voice is a little shot. I went to a sporting event recently, and even though they lost, I gave my all. But I'd love to hear about your winter doors. Send in your snap of a local Santa variant, a story, a moment of a visitor, a saint, a Santa, abuela, or uncle that changed your December. Now, if tonight gave you a better story to bring to the table, tap follow, flip on auto download, and leave a quick review. It helps the show meet new ears before the cookies are gone. And share this episode with the friend who insists that Coca-Cola invented Santa. And we all still love you, Kevin. Up next on the main feed is going to be the 1914 Christmas truce. Candles on parapets, carols across the wire, letters tucked in greatcoats, and the puzzle of tenderness inside a machine built for steel. One small night measured in hours that still manages to echo. That being said, I have been Dylan Gassaway, and this has been Naked History. Always remember to stay curious, stay warm, and stay naked, historically speaking. We'll see you in the next one.